Studio, we're having our Kickstarter upon us, where we get to look at actualization of RAPEX Act and where it's leading Uganda, the examination of the legislative works on the RAPEX Act. Now, when you look at 2021, in February, Cabinet took a decision to merge, to mainstream and to rationalize government agencies, commissions, authorities and public expenditure, one, to facilitate the efficient as well as effective service delivery. Since then, legislators have been trying to assess the quality of the idea of rationalization of agencies and public expenditure RAPEX until the 17th of April, when the House passed bills informing the merger policy. And so everyone's like, okay, so the actualization of this is starting to take shape. Now, this week, the President assented to 19 bills, for 15 of which are majorly centered on mergers, where our discussion this morning is going to be centered on. In studios with me, I am joined by Joseph Ochieno, who's a political analyst, and we also do have Dr. Bainomugisha, the executive director with ACODE. Expectedly, we'll be joined by Honorable Christopher Komakech, a member of Parliament, Aru South County. But I'm going to allow my guests to have their salutations to you, and then we journey on with the rationalization assessment, starting with my immediate left.
Good morning, Priscilla. It's fantastic to be here. You've got a fantastic new mode into these studios of yours. It sounds and feels very serious.
Thank you.
Very steady for the morning, so I'm delighted to be here. And so, yes, talking rationalization, you guys have done it very, very well in terms of moving forward. But these are legislations that broke the system, hardly 15 years ago. What were these guys thinking 15 years ago to create, an array of organizations which, if anything, if I look at New Vision today, I just think is nothing else but intended to organize and mobilize and perfect national patronage to serve particular individuals. It's very difficult not to politicize it from that context. And why I'm saying that is that I'm looking at New Vision, a headline today, and allow me to say so, that in it is a picture where the Chief of Defense Forces is receiving medical supplies from Egyptian government. And I wonder, are these supplies for Ugandan military? Are these supplies for Ugandan health departments? And is actually backed by and supported by Minister for Agriculture? So no, I think this country is being taken for a ride, and whoever sought to rationalize the process 15 years ago needs to be put to test. But also New Vision, I'm not doing a press review. New Vision headline at the front says, U.S. Senator behind Uganda's sanctions, guilty of corruption. Meaning, therefore, these guys want to swear us away. So if a senator involved in seeking sanctions against Uganda is guilty of corruption, what about top Ugandan legislators from the top? So what basically the point is saying to say? I think this has involved a huge amount of wastage, long overdue, and as I said, generally, in principle, it's the right thing to do because it would be saving. Because if you go into the details much later, I'm not quite sure whether should have happened in the first instance.
Right, you've heard Dr. Bainomugisha also looking and glancing through the Daily Monitor to see what he can pick of in his introductions. Good morning to you, Doctor.
Good morning. Thank you for having me here. NTV, it is always a pleasure to share views with Ugandans. Good morning, fellow Ugandans. It is an opportunity to share with us and with you the issues that affect the nation and try to forge ahead better. Okay.
All right. So now looking at President ascending to the rationalization of several government agencies, you're looking at the purpose being aiming at efficiency and also optimizing resources at the end of the day. But it's government that has also introduced seemingly many other policies and additional positions in the recent past, and additional authorities and extended mandates that have actually sucked out the 15 years, Joseph, that you were talking about. So it begs the question, is the RAPEX Act actually bending towards government's intentions, or it's actually moving away from it?
I think it's difficult to tell. Possibly, to be fair to them, we give them possibly 2 years, meaning a government, not this regime, but a government, because these are ministerial, departmental things that may not necessarily have to affect to be involved, involving a direct government of the day. But as I said, in principle, some of the agencies were absolutely unnecessary, and so.
When you say some of those, from your perspective, which ones in particular?
In fact, possibly nearly all. I've seen here the NADS project, for example, where people made huge amount of money, individuals, and almost every Ugandan knows, but in many cases you could say that, well, these are things that could have been done via Ministry for Agriculture. The Karamoja Development Agency Authority, or thereabout, is being returned allegedly to Ministry for Karamoja. But for me, I would suggest that, is there a need for a Ministry for Karamoja? Is there a need for Ministry for Luwero? Or is there basically a fact that central government, you provide education, you provide health, you provide infrastructure, and then you plan centrally and use local government to be able to do this? We have generally very, very big government that, away from these agencies, the size of our parliament is excessively big. The size of the ministers are excessively big. The amount of spend that government does on a daily basis is excessively big. The manner in which the political elite in this country live in terms of opulence is excessively big. Looking at what is happening in Kenya, perhaps the time is now for this government to look inward and look us as citizens in the face and review all these other things. So let the rationalization of these agencies be part of the process of beginning to look inward and make sure that Uganda's tax dollar, every bit, is spent responsibly. So I've given you 2 examples that are actually quite obviously commonsensical, that they did not necessarily need to go in there. When you look into the data, some of them are actually, you look at maybe the Libraries Act. Libraries need books, the Education Act. Some of these are direct departmental provisions that should not have happened in the first place. There's an education finance bill that I don't have too much of the details on it. No, we need to basically just inject resources in schools and institutions and make sure that, like UPC did, and we gave Mr. Museveni, pays university fees for people who've qualified. Give, make sure that every young person from Karamoja, who passes their A level, gets guaranteed university education plus cost of living monies as extras for them. And these agencies and departments become absolutely irrelevant. Because, as I said, in any case, maybe one of the things we could do is, I'm not quite sure, I don't know what my good colleague might think, at what stage are we going to review basically the effect of any of those agencies that has successfully worked, to the extent that I've actually argued that even the other controversial one, the National Roads Authority one, was it necessarily anything that would count by? It was part of Ministry of Works. Ministry of Works under previous governments delivered railways, delivered roads, delivered public transport. But what has this one generally done rather than...
Doctor, this also comes off the heels of 2 things that have happened recently. You do have an overseer over the overseer of URA. You do have an overseer over the overseers of Karamoja and Tessa affairs. And here we are being told that at the end of the day, we are trying to manage our costs, live within our means, and that is what is being told to the public. But while the parliament is moving in one direction, the other support elements of government are moving in the opposite direction. Are we really, truly rationalizing?
No, thank you very much. I think that, all governments, when a new government comes in power, they will always try to create opportunities or institutions that would deliver their manifesto. So if you look at for example, the Obote one government, we had the parastatals. Then the NRM government from '86, that we have had these agencies as a mechanism, as a delivery mechanism for delivering service delivery and creating transformation. But actually, they are all experiments. And I think, okay, governments experiment. When you look at, if you compare to the US, when a new government, when a new party wins elections and comes into power, they have what they call a spoils system. It means that about 5,000 jobs, top jobs, are lost by the old outgoing administration, and the new administration comes in. But what is at the core is that actually every government should pursue to deliver socio-economic transformation, service delivery, create jobs, create wealth for the country. Now, what has happened in our time, I think, in this government, is I think they went in overdrive and created agencies that are not necessary. And I'm glad that the government has come to that realization that there is a lot of wastage, there is a lot of duplication, there is a lot of competition, and has bred corruption that people actually can go to the Ministry of Finance, can go to Parliament, the committees responsible for the budget, and influence money in a different direction, which makes government fail to work as one government. And so the government decision to rationalize agencies and create a lean government, a one government that is efficient, that is not bloated, and save public administration expenditure, which is bloated. It was a move in the right direction. Now, what is disheartening is the abortion. It aborted. The rationalization has aborted. It has been captured. Of course, my friend, you are a member of Parliament?
No.
No, you are by Parliament, by people going to Parliament and actually twisting it. We hear, and I have no evidence, but the President is on record that members of Parliament were bribed, that some technical officials in the Ministry of Finance were bribed to change the budget. And so what we have is not actually technical budget, it's a budget that has been actually tampered with. And what is the consequence of that? The consequence of that is that rationalization is not on focus, is not on course. It has become also business, it has remained business as usual. And the consequence of that is a bloated public administration expenditure. It's talking about the Parliament. You can imagine 545 members of Parliament in a chamber that was supposed to accommodate 80 members of Parliament. So they are doing nothing. All they can do are deals. They actually, in deals, they are not actually working for this country. Then, of course, you know, and a number of others, the RDCs, the presidential advisors, all that is too much. And then, of course, there's employees in the agencies that actually are duplicating the work in the ministries. So I think for me, I knew ACODE works with the Ministry of Finance and the Budget Transparency Initiative to ensure transparency and accountability in execution of the budget, actually from the whole budget process, making process to execution. And we've been advising the Ministry of Finance to be bold, because undertaking rationalization, of course, is politically charged, because it means job losses. It means, of course, losing support in some sectors. But you see, if you're doing it for the sake of the country, you know that ultimately it is actually going to yield dividends. And the dividends, for example, if rationalization took place, was implemented as was planned, the government would save about 1 trillion. And that 1 trillion could be pushed, for example, the PDM and all these wealth creation initiatives, create jobs, lift 39% of our population that is outside the money economy. But at the same time, the government had planned that they will provide resources to those people who are going to lose jobs, so that you push them to the private sector. Because I think our private sector is starved. Because what we think is, Uganda is supposed to be a private sector-led economy. But it's not, because most of the companies, most of the businesses belong to technocrats,
Okay.
to the civil servants.
All right. In that regard, some money experts say instead of cutting down on expenses to meet your present-day needs, why not expand your source of income to be able to then meet what you have, but also what you want to achieve at the end of the day?
And you know how to expand that envelope, the resource envelope, would be to support the private sector. You see, this is supposed to be a private sector-led economy. So that's why I was saying, if actually you released about 20,000, about 15,000, these very educated people in their early years of 40, 45 to the private sector, and equip them, prepare them, you need to retool them, reskill them to become business people. Because what is happening is that these people actually are running some businesses very, very poorly, because even their workers are stealing. To steal, then someone steals, and then so. But if they went to run their businesses, you would be supporting the what? The private sector to create jobs, to work hard and create wealth. But at the same time, of course, you know that government also they have a lot of domestic areas. Many of the businesses that have supplied to the government are not have not been paid, and that, of course, now is squeezing them. They're running out of business, people are losing jobs. Okay. So support the private sector to grow, pay the private sector, but make sure that the government is lean, equip it with few technically highly motivated people to run the government.
All
the
right.
rest of us, let us go in the private sector and create wealth, then government taxes us, then provide services.
To that note, the president having penned a signature to 19 laws, and then 15 of which were actually emphasizing the merging. Among all the laws that were signed by the president, Joseph Ochieno, which one actually caught your eye and was outstanding as a governance and policy expert? And how important is it to the development of Uganda at this time?
I'm not sure any of them is really of import into the development of the Republic of Uganda, but I must say 19 of them, all of the 19 seem relevant, except I found it interesting that I think there's one, I think on education, that he amongst the many others that he returned. What clearly has been said, these agencies were unnecessary, and I just don't necessarily agree with Arthur in terms of saying every new government that comes in, comes in their own ways. Fair enough, they do. But this government, this regime came in 1986. These agencies were formed 20 years into the administration. So basically, meaning after 40 years, we've been subjected to experimental governance every other day. And in fact, looking at it, I'll take you back to just yesterday. I was watching the first opening of British Parliament, and where the new government has put in, tabled 40 new bills. In the 40 new bills, it has got a comprehensive legislative agenda that is so comprehensive that you begin to ask how much time do legislators have, to the extent, therefore, that they left one of the things for which the population was pushing for. This is a push for child poverty. And do you know what? Members of Parliament made sure from both sides of the aisle that because it was an important thing, and they felt that the government might be delaying it, they raised it, waited for the Prime Minister's question time, otherwise the Prime Minister was making his delivery, to push this thing so that it eats into public opinion. The guy has to admit that, look, this is something which I take very seriously, it's important, and we will be definitely looking at it in the course of this Parliament. Okay. That sort of is really how it works. From this perspective, I think these agencies were created as a corruption agency. They were created to push exactly agency for corruption, contrary to what you're saying. Number two, they push to create quangos for jobs, for patronage. And in many cases, you could also say that they were created to experiment, after all these other times, they did not work. I suspect part of the pressure now is because of the shrinking envelope in terms of our resources. So it is possible that government is realizing that, well, they cannot sustain this. And should you rationalize this, or do you reduce the size of parliament. Do you rationalize this, or do you reduce the spends on a president's suits?
All right. Doctor, were any of the 19 signed, any of them that was outstanding for you in particular?
There is of course, rationalization is fine, but also the NGO amendment bill, and that touches us, our operations. Of course, one of the major things in the NGO amendment bill is the NGO Bureau has been actually now taken
returned to
the ministry as a department. We had gotten used to it, and so we are going to learn how we don't know how actually it's going to help create an enabling environment for civil society, because you cannot have a democracy without a vibrant civil society. So we have enjoyed, we have lived with it, and now we have a new kid on the block to deal with. And my expectation is actually it should not curtail the operations, the smooth operations of the NGOs, because if NGOs were not here, a lot of gaps in this country, and we bring in money, we bring in jobs, and of course they trickle down. So for me, that is very critical, and I'm looking forward to adjusting actually to it and to learning it how to actually even comply.
Okay. Let's look at the unsigned ones, in particular putting out the UNESCO Amendment Act and the Higher Education Students Financing Amendment Bill. Those returned unsigned. And so it begs the question, why do you think these were left out, and how do they get to be realigned within in order to push for a signature from the President?
If you don't mind, I'll give that to Arthur first, but I thought I would add that actually I omitted that one. The NGO one was very specific to me, and I totally agree with Arthur that it's possibly one of the agencies that needed to have been left as a standalone. It's psychologically in every sense, returning it to the Ministry of Internal Affairs and considering the politics, particularly the last 4 or 5 years, it's almost, to me, it's almost intimidation of the freedom of operations for NGOs. In any case, the board had already been substantially accused of being, an arm of the state, and many NGOs felt that they really substantially squeezed. So being taken back to the Ministry of Internal Affairs, I'm not quite sure whether it's something which is...
Okay, all right. We're going to be taking a short breather. When we return, we're going to look at those particular 2 bills that were unsigned and the implications thereof. Please stay with us. We are still with the Kickstarter actualization of the RAPEX Act and where it is leading Uganda. We've been having this conversation right from the top of the hour with Joseph Ochieno, a political analyst, and also Dr. Arthur Bainomugisha, who is the executive director with ACODE, whom we left on the heels of him responding to some of these bills that were not signed by the President. Reasons as to why and what's the way forward.
Yes, thank you very much. My response, of course, is that the President has the prerogative, because once the Parliament has passed the bills, then the Parliament, the Executive also analyzes these bills, so that when they are signed into law, can be operation, can be used to serve to improve the livelihoods of the citizens. When she, the President, finds that they are lacking in certain aspects, it is his right and duty to return them to Parliament for fine-tuning, and then they can be signed into law. When there is a standoff between the executive and the Parliament, 30 days elapses and he has not signed, of course, automatically they become law. So in this case, most of these bills that were returned, I don't find them controversial. I think they are, and I've not looked at what the President raised, but I think he must have found some of the missing links, and once the Parliament fixes that. But my advice again is that anyway, there are so many bills. It is really...
the 11th Parliament is riding in so many bills.
The Parliament has been very productive. They have generated a lot of bills, and I think for them, their performance is going to be based on how many bills they have been generated and they have been signed into law. But my advice also is that don't over-legislate.
Okay.
Don't over-legislate, especially the laws that are not going to use to help this country, which will stay on the shelves and gather the dust. I think we need to also look at a law is useful in as long as it is operational, it's desired to improve the socio-economic and political lives of the citizens.
All right. 15 years ago, Joseph, you did mention the creation of some of these agencies, and yet you do have some of those bills, for example, the National Records and Archives Amendment Bill 2024, which at the time of its, being put into order, it was never operationalized till date. And so it's been lying there dormant for 15 years. It begs the question, now that government's eyes have been opened up and they need to actually continue on with the rationalization, where does this leave the confidence of Ugandans in the government to be able to progress them into the desired future?
You see, unfortunately, these are discussions we never have, and it's part of my problem as also a member of the political class, and you guys, the members of the political elite, in fact, the national elite. We don't really have sufficient conversations about this. So in other words, even some of the legislation being suggested have really not gone through the necessary rigorous conversations that should take place within the public, with you guys in the media, and the political class, and in fact led normally, as I always instruct, the political parties and political party leaders. Okay. So I really don't know what the opposition political parties' positions on these particular issues are on this. But yes, on the National Archives, Records and Archives amendment bills, it sort of seemed to make sense, because if you think about the national sensitivity, it's about enabling and mainstream of national records and archives agencies, thereby entirely relieving the government of the financial drain on its resources and the burden of wasteful administration and expenditure. Obviously commonsensical, But they say the bill provides for the objective of this act contained in the government policy of that, as said. But they were seeking to dissolve what, in my opinion, is possibly a sensible facilitation of efficient and effective service delivery by clearly delineating the mandates and the functions of the ministry in respect of the agency, thereby avoiding duplication.
All right.
I think generally some of these agencies could still be successfully managed through respective ministries, and they could be merely departments, not necessarily agencies, and they would be efficient. Because in any case, as I said, these things had functioned. I think that how we spend our national resources are slightly, to me, much more important, and how much we invest in these respective areas of concerns, rather than, as you want to say, possibly creating quangos that at the end of the day do not serve. And as Arthur says, legislators talk about the numbers of bills, and Mr. President, how many legislations is signed, rather than how much of this have directly impacted on the population. All
right, gentlemen in blue, thank you so much for your submissions. We can't have closing remarks until government actually closes on this decision outrightly to the benefit of Ugandans. But we